And Bruce, thank you very much for being here. Take it away.
Good evening. I'm Bruce Moore. I have been a member of the Dallas Joomla User Group since probably 2012 or 2013. I am not a web developer. I'm retired at this point, but my career was in a field called operations research, which is basically, it's mathematical modeling for a lot of business problems. In my particular case, pricing and financial services. I went out on my own in 2010 and built a website, not for e-commerce, but really just to, prove that I was in business for somebody doing research on me. And I chose Joomla, and I'm so glad that I did, because since then I have inherited a couple of WordPress sites as a volunteer, and each time I swear that I will never get involved in another WordPress site. Tonight, I want to talk about the most recent site that I did. I actually ran for office in 2020, and there was for a county commission seat, and there was someone in this town who has the same name and was fairly prominent, and I knew that I had to start. That I had to appear at the top of the search list, as people started doing research on me, and that actually turned out to be very important during absentee voting, which was a huge part of this election cycle. Because on the day that absentee voting started, there was immediately a big shift in traffic on my site. It was very, very clear that people were doing research on. My first slide is, I kind of got ahead of myself a little bit. A couple of years ago, when I moved from Dallas to Michigan, Jeff made a comment that he really wanted to try out my snowblower. And I have to tell you, Jeff, you missed another opportunity. So next winter, if you want to use my snowblower and clear the driveway, just let me know, and we can arrange a visit.
Okay, maybe next winter.
So anyhow, I needed a website that ranked #1 for my name very, very quickly. And I'm happy to report that the website that I built, within about a month, it took up the first half dozen of the search results for my name. And this is what DuckDuckGo shows today. It's got, my site is the first one, and it's got some nice breakouts. If you do the same query on Google, I have the first 2 slots. The third slot is a letter to the editor that I wrote to the local newspaper. And if you look at at Bing, it does a better display than Google, but really picks out several of the things that were important features on my site. So some of the attention that I spent on SEO really worked, because prior to this, if you had done this query, you would have gotten information on Bruce Moore, president of Michigan Broadband, and a number of references to both that company and Chamber of Commerce sites and all sorts of different places where he was listed. What I'm going to talk about tonight are schema.org tags for, I'm just going to go back to the normal location here. Schema.org tags for metadata. If you are not familiar with schema.org, I would encourage you to spend some time learning about schema.org tags. That's really everything that I'm going to be talking about tonight. The most important one, and I think just about every website should have one, is an organization tag. And we'll talk about that in a little bit, a little bit more detail. You also need a person tag, particularly if this is a business that's sole proprietorship or something like that. You should have a person tag. If you have a staff page, there should be a person tag for each of the people that's on your staff page. And finally, the other tag that is going to be really important for most websites is an event tag. I'm not going to talk about that a whole lot tonight because I didn't have any events on this particular website. And that isn't really something that you can do in a template. That's something that you need to look at in calendar plugins. But that is an important tag that you need. Okay, every organization should have an organization tag. This tells Google all of the key information about your organization in a way that Google and its search robots and Bing and the search robots, that they can all interpret. This is the ugly markup for the organization tag on my website. It's got the name of my committee. It's got the URL. It's got email. It's got a contact phone number. It's got the address. And the area where Google should favor this. So it's got the latitude and longitude of Grand Traverse County. That's really all an organization tag is. And that makes it easier for Google to interpret where it should display your results when people are doing local searches. The next tag that you need to make sure that you have is a person tag. And this should appear on all of your staff pages. In my case, the person tag, the most beneficial place that it occurred was in a list of candidates who participated in a League of Women Voters forum and who participated in a Chamber of Commerce forum. And it turns out that at this point, if you Google my opponent, my website shows up as about the number 6th item on Google for that. He actually won, and the first 6 are actually on the county website. There are lots more attributes that can go on the person tag, and I encourage you to go out to schema.org and look at those, because if you have a staff page, there are probably a number of those attributes that you're going to want to implement. Okay, there are some tools for testing markup. The old one that has been sort of the standard for a little more than a decade is the Google Structured Data Testing tool. They are phasing that out and moving it to a new, okay, is this any better? Did that improve the?
Oh, yes, much better.
Okay, sorry about that. The structured data testing tool, Google is phasing that out in favor of a newer rich snippets tool. They're not eliminating it. People are up in arms about the fact that Google wanted to eliminate it. So they're keeping it as a syntax testing tool for really all of the different kinds of schema.org data. But that's not what the structured data testing tool implements tags that Google is not using for doing rich snippets in their display. They're doing a new rich snippet testing tool. It doesn't read a number of pages that I've submitted to it. So one of the things that we have to do as webmasters going forward and developers going forward is to make sure that our websites are accessible through the rich snippets testing tool. I encourage everybody to play with these and to use them on a regular basis, because the results and the output changes on a monthly basis. And finally, there are a number of other commercial alternatives for testing the syntax on your page. Okay, this is an output from the structured data testing tool for my campaign website, and looking at the organization, that big nasty organization tag that I showed you a little while ago. This is how Google interprets it. And ideally, you want something that doesn't have any errors or warnings in it. This is the same page in the rich snippets tool. And that the rich snippets tool at this point doesn't like something about my campaign website. I'm not entirely sure what it doesn't like. It liked it at the time, a year ago, but something has changed either through maintenance or changes in caching. Minification actually appears to be one of the issues that it struggles with. So in working on your pages, you need to make sure to test using both the structured data and the rich snippets testing tool. Okay, there are several different ways to add these metadata tags. I'm going to start out showing the easiest one, which is putting a non-visible mark module, somewhere on your page, and putting the organization tag in it. That is far and away the easiest way to add an organization tag to your website, and that's a big part of it, and that worked really well. You can also add markup to a page, and I'll show you how I did that for the list of candidates for the League of Women Voters forum. You can do some plugins, but the good ones cost some money, and I didn't have a whole lot of money that I wanted to spend on this, so I did not do any of the plugins. There are a couple that advertise they're free, but they don't actually, I tried those and they don't actually produce much in the way of good markup. Finally, I looked at my template, because the template, most templates implement some aspects of the article and the blog tag, but not all of the attributes that Google really wants you to add. And that's going to be the sort of the gist of this presentation. Ideally, you want to choose a template that does most of this stuff for you. And as we move into Joomla 4 and deal with a variety of different changes, I think this is going to be a big part of what we look at in selecting new tools as we look for Joomla 4 compatibility in in templates and plugins and everything. I encourage you to spend some time looking at the metadata that your template produces. And then finally, I'm going to show you a little bit about how I made modifications to my template to improve the way that it did some of the tagging. Okay, for that organization tag, the JSON version of schema.org metadata it's very easily the most powerful, but it'll get stripped out by a lot of editors if you don't have the exact right settings. And on sites I've had the right settings, and JCE or MCE puts in some maintenance, and suddenly the next time I edit something, all of my script statements and JSON statements get stripped out. So I have ended up using just the bare bones HTML editor that doesn't have any of the WYSIWYG capabilities to make sure that it doesn't strip stuff out. In any case, always do your markup in just a text editor on your desktop, and then paste it in to the testing tools, and make sure that you keep a copy of it in case the editor on Joomla strips it out during the save process. Because the first time I tried this, I lost a bunch of carefully crafted JSON markup, and I was not a happy camper. Okay, so to do this one, if you go down and look at the very bottom, this is the modules page, where I'm placing all of the different components on my website. And I've got two things in the footer. One is the required text for, paid for, which is, required by election law. And I've also got a schema.org organization tag in the footer. So let's take a look at that. This is just a custom module, and I've taken the script that I showed you earlier and pasted it in here. So this is placed in the footer of my web page, but it doesn't actually display anything. I've got the title turned off. I've got it published. This is the easiest place and the easiest way to add an organization tag to your website. You can choose what, through the menu assignment, you can choose where it's displayed if you don't want it on all pages. But this is by far the easiest place to put the organization tag that you probably want, on just about all the pages of your website. And that doesn't cost you any money. Okay, you can also use inline HTML in an article. This is how I did that people tag, where I listed all of the participants in the League of Women Voters Forum. You can use this format and make it invisible, but you've got to add some syntax to make it visible to bots, but not visible to users. And again, pay attention to what your editor settings are so you don't lose text. So this is just this is a standard. This is the article introducing the forum, the League of Women Voters Forum, and linking to the page where the League of Women Voters had the video for the forum. And I listed all of the different candidates with these. If you notice this, the item scope tag that lists the item type of schema.org/person, and then the various span tags that identify the item property of job title, and then again the item property of the person's name, and then closing that schema.org division tag. So I did that for everyone, and at this point, when you query these people, it'll actually bring up this page on my website. So the people tag, if you want your staff page to be found when someone is searching for one of your staff members by name, putting these people tags on your staff page is a great way to make your site rank when people are searching on names. Okay, next I want to talk about templates. Those first two steps are easy. This step is a little bit harder. Most templates implement article tags, but they don't necessarily do it consistently. at least among the free templates. Some of the paid templates might do a better job of this, but all of my websites are ultra low budget, and about the only thing that I pay for at this point is Akiba backup and Akiba admin tools. Most templates also implement some minimal version of the blog tag, but they don't implement all the attributes that Google wants them to implement in order to have a good display. If you're familiar with CSS customization, most templates do this pretty conveniently, and I've done some minor CSS customization on most of my sites. The ease of doing PHP customization, which is necessary for this step, it varies a lot from template to template. And that was probably the biggest reason that I chose a particular template for my campaign website. So this is the structured data testing tool for my wife's genealogy site, which uses the Forte template, and I've never done any special work on it. And you can tell that Google, for the article tag, Google wants it to have an author, date published, and all sorts of other stuff. And that template does not implement any of those tags on that, or excuse me, any of those attributes on the article tag. If you look at the same site under rich snippets, it appears to, through other means, it appears to find that article author and some other things, but it's still missing some of the key information that Google wants in order to do its rich snippet display. What I'm going to talk about here is how to go about adding some of those attributes to your template. I talked about it before, but when you're choosing a template, spend some time testing demos to find out, so that you have a template that starts out doing a good job of doing this metadata, and also find out how easy it is to do PHP overrides in your template. Most templates do CSS pretty easily. PHP overrides are a different story. The Forte template that's my favorite, it's based on the Vertex framework. The right template that I did for my campaign site is based upon the right framework, and they've got some very different capabilities. The Google rules change daily, so which one works better is not likely to be the same 6 months from now. That rich snippets display that I just showed you, this didn't look this good on the Forte template a year ago. A year ago, this display really looked awful. The right template does a better job with the default blog metadata implementation, and it's easier to modify and add additional attributes to that tag. The Forte at this point is actually working better for rich snippets, but I haven't been able to figure out how to modify the PHP to change the HTML that's produced. Again, couldn't find a place in the Forte template to figure out what to do. These are the attributes that are missing in the Forte template that Google wants you to have in order to display a rich snippet. And this is what, in the right template, it's easy to find out where it puts things and where to do overrides. It's also actually missing several attributes in publishing the blog tag. So let's go in and look at how to do this override in the right template. if you go in and list, your templates and go to File, it'll bring up this display. And if you go over to the left side, all of the things from Joomla Shack that are based upon the right framework have a directory called overrides. And you can copy some of the different PHP that generates, blog articles and blog items into this override directory and make modifications. If you look down in sort of the lower part of this code display, you'll see a comment of begin structured data override. And there follows a set of lines that I added to add those different missing attributes to the blog item display. Let's go, and I'm just cutting those out. This is not something, you have to know some PHP and some HTML in order to make this work. It does require some coding skills. It took me probably about a day to figure out which syntax things that I needed in order to find the PHP and the Joomla command to pull up the date published, date modified, the author, and the publisher. This is probably going to vary a little bit from template to template, but in the way that the right template works, this wasn't bad. I couldn't figure out how to do this in the Forte template. So this is back just showing where that code fits in down in sort of the lower right of this display. That really got me to a Search Console display that didn't have certainly as many missing attributes for those blog tags and the article tags. There are plugins that'll do this. There's on the extensions website for Joomla, there's one called Google Structured Data. It lists as being free, but if you go and actually try to download it, there's a free version and a paid version. I tried the free version, and it doesn't really do very much. To really get anything useful out of that particular plugin, you've got to go with the paid version. Among paid templates, I do know that the paid version of JEvent implements event tags, and increasingly some of the plugins that are available in the Joomla Shack subscription, those are starting to implement some of the metadata tags. But as an ecosystem, I think we're really way behind in how we implement this stuff. There are also plugins that'll do Open Graph, for Facebook. Personally, I haven't spent a whole lot of time on that. At some point, I need to, but that's not a subject that I really know a whole lot about. As you begin your Joomla 4 migration plan, you're probably going to have to switch templates. And I think you should look at how the new template implements metadata and test it both on the structured data testing tool and in Google Rich Snippets to find out how well your template implements principally the blog and the article tags in ways that Google can pick those up and do stuff with. That's everything that I've got at this point. Are there any questions, slides that people want me to go back or would you like to go in and actually look at the back end of the website and ask some questions there with a live display?
Feel free just to unmute your mic and ask away.
Bruce, I had a question on when you were talking about the overrides. And if I was understanding you correctly, you essentially, to create your override, you essentially took the original file and just appended your code at the end.
In the case of the right template, it ended up being just appending at the end. If
Okay.
it had been in the Forte template, it was going to be right in the middle, and I couldn't figure out exactly how to do that conveniently.
Okay, and then my follow-up question to that is, once you do that, is that something, I guess it may just depend on the page, because some of these pages with templates never change once they put it out. Is this something that you'd have to go back and just match to updates every once in a while and make sure you're not missing any new update in the other part of the code?
Yes. Yes. And that's a problem with having to do this, as template override.
Well,
right now,
it is, but it's not unsimilar to building a child theme. You have to kind of do the same with a child theme, right? Because it's essentially child themes are just overrides for different files.
yeah, and that's actually one of the reasons that I hate WordPress. But I remember seeing, early on when I was picking up a WordPress site, and this guy was saying, and all you have to do is put this little bit of HTML in this file, and it's like, wait a minute, I don't want to do that, even though I know HTML or know PHP. But yes, you do have to do maintenance, and that's actually one of the things that why I chose the right theme to do this, is that it had a clear path for keeping track of overrides. So that when I do maintenance on that theme or template, it's not going to get overwritten. My changes aren't going to get overwritten, but I am going to have to go back and potentially, and do a diff, and potentially re-implement my changes in the new code from the template. The Forte template, I could not figure out how to do a modification that wasn't going to get overwritten.
Right.
Now, in some respects, the good news in the Forte template is that almost all of the functionality is actually in the Vertex framework. Most of the modules in the Forte template are just an include or something in Vertex, which that was part of, I think that was part of the issue of trying to figure out where I would go in and make these fixes.
Did you ever reach out to the theme authors and ask them where they would recommend putting this, or?
No, I didn't. Because I was on such a constrained timeline and was in a business project, I probably would have, but in this situation, as a first-time local candidate, I was overwhelmed with the needs for graphic design, the need for understanding campaign finance law, the need for raising funds to pay, and getting graphic design for signs done, and understanding the campaign finance laws around signs and the township laws or ordinances about sign placement and sign size. Whitewater Township actually requires that you put a phone number on your sign. None of the other townships do. I am fairly confident that mine were the only signs displayed in Whitewater Township that were actually compliant. I'm certain that my opponent's signs weren't compliant. Yeah, I was just overwhelmed, and on such a short timeline, I did not try to do anything, going out with to get some, in essence, some tech support help on doing that.
Okay.
As I start into the transition to Joomla 4, I probably will do that. I mean, one of the first things I'll do is to find out if my templates are going to be supported on Joomla 4.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions from anybody?
Yes, I have a question. You had mentioned a module, using a module as opposed to, I guess, the template override, perhaps? What would be the downside of that?
There is no downside. And, actually for the organization tag, the module is the best place, is really probably the best place to put that. The need for template modifications is to improve the article and blog tags so that Google can interpret those in a way that it can use them to improve your search display.
And that couldn't be achieved with a module, you're saying?
No.
Okay.
No, I don't see any way that I could have done the blog or the article tags with a module.
I think it might depend on, I could be wrong on this, but it may depend on what and this might be the same thing, when a blog post displays, what does it inherit from the category and from the menu settings? Because sometimes whatever you set for that menu item will show up on every blog page that's associated with it, and sometimes it won't. So you could do a module solution for your blog page, but you'd have to test it.
And that actually, let's see if I can find. Did I? Yes. This is actually, I think what's happening in Google's rich snippets
Mhm.
is that they're starting to interpret the markup across multiple tags that are on the same page and doing some smarter things, because it should not have picked up, the author and other stuff. I think that is actually from those the Joomla display of the author and some of those other items. They're not part of the blog tag. So I think Google is starting to do some more parsing of pages, but that implies that you are displaying those fields as part of your article display.
Okay.
If you want to hide those, you're going to have to figure out some other way to get them into Google's hands, and in that case, you would have to do. You'd have to either have a template that does it by default or make some modifications to your template. And this is why you really need to use both of these tools to interpret your pages, and what they output changes on a regular basis. Because I actually did a user group session on metadata tagging probably 5 or 6 years ago. And 5 or 6 years ago, you didn't have to do any modifications to add additional attributes in order for Google to love it. And today you do. So, I mean, Google is changing the rules on a regular basis, and you need to use both of these tools to figure out just exactly how Google is going to interpret it. And for that matter, some of the other search engines, it's clear if you go back to the original search results that Bing is doing a lot more interpretation of my tags and site structure than Google is. And DuckDuckGo also took advantage of my markup in ways that Google did not.
DuckDuckGo is more associated with how Bing does things than Google. I mean, it borrows from both, but it is associated in the Bing universe. Bing uses it for some of its processing. Shoot, we came across this research in Bing ads, and now because I'm trying to speak from memory and old brain cells can't quite remember. But yes, I would just say DuckDuckGo is part of the Bing universe.
Okay.
So Bing rules will apply to that.
Hey,
and that's
Bruce.
interesting that Bing likes all the details that you put in more than Google, who told you to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, Rick.
Yeah, my question goes back to maybe being a little bit simpler in the concept here. And I just want to say, how did you come up with this approach of looking at how you could get that article content to come up higher from the search engines? How did you know to take this approach? Did you read about it? Via some other forums, and then how applicable, again, the key things that I got out of it were organization, person, and event. Are there other tags that play into that are important, and can they be used? This was a political implementation, but it can be used. Can it be used in many different approaches?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. There are tags. Actually, let me change my sharing here. I'm going to stop this and bring up just a web browser. Okay, if you go to okay, if can everybody see this this browser page with Google Structured Data plugin?
Yes, you're good.
Okay, this is when I first started building this website. I first installed the free version of this plugin because it says it's a free download. And it lists all of these different types that it supports. Articles, which most templates have a minimal implementation of articles and blogs. My template mods were to improve these, but it's also got tags for courses, events, FAQs, products, recipes, fact checking, local business, videos, movies, reviews, just all sorts of additional tags. So for an e-commerce site, you're definitely going to want product tag. And if you know, like for Jeff, he's probably going to want to have event tags for everything on his calendar. Now it's going to take a complete replacement of his approach to calendaring to do this, but that, you know, that would be something that would be for his site. And there are a lot of different things that you could add if you had a storefront, you know, like a coffee shop. There are a lot of different location types of tags that you would want to add to your site in that case. And, you know, events, this is probably something that is either going to need to be in a plugin that you're using to manage your events. Products, you know, it depends upon exactly what kind of e-commerce site you're using. On a small one, you could just do the product markup with, if you're using an article for each item, you could manually insert those product tags. Using a plugin approach would be better. The problem that I ran into is that when I said, oh, this is great, it's got every tag that I would ever need, and I went to the download page and download free or buy pro. And I downloaded the free version, and the free version really didn't have, you know, any of the tags that I was particularly interested in. So that, did I end up answering your question in that long time?
Yeah, it helped a lot more. I could see how where they, yeah, you would, this be a good place to start. I see. You bet.
Now, if you have an e-commerce plugin that you're using, I would make, or one, you're building an e-commerce site, I would make the implementation of metadata a big decision-making criteria for which of those plugins I choose.
According to the schema.org website, there's 779 different types of data or
Hmm.
tags.
How many, 779?
Yeah, click on that second one where it just says schemas. Click right there in the middle. Yep.
Yeah.
779 types.
Wow.
Yeah, and a number of these are nested. Let's see. Like, you know, the organization tag, address, you know, can be either a postal address or text. Postal address is itself a schema.org tag. You could do an organization tag that is extremely complex. This is an example of marking that up the way I did the person tag. You've got to go through some hoops to make that non-displayable. And as I was scrambling to put the presentation together last night and this morning, I couldn't remember where I found that. But there is a way to do this type of markup that doesn't display. Really, the best way to do a complex metadata tag is the JSON approach. And that's actually pretty easy to understand. But and this is really where it gets into the whole thing of nesting. Like this address is a nested type of postal address. So you can actually have some of these tags that are, particularly with the JSON implementation, that are nested several layers deep.
Any other questions, anybody? Questions, going once, going twice? All right, well, Bruce, thank you very, very much. I'm going to stop the recording now.